fact that trying to be your best in a confined arena where there was wins and losses, improvement, struggles, all those lessons and all the things that take place within a basketball court and the practice and preparation for games made me who I am as a person growing up. I like to joke that at Stanford undergrad, sometimes I didn't know the answers, but then when I went to business school, there was oftentimes I didn't even understand the question. Our best player, Todd Licht, who played in the NBA and was our star, I saw him. He scored 36 points against Arizona on national TV on a Thursday night against Sean Elliott. And I said, "What are you doing?" And it's probably 10 o'clock now. He goes, "I'm going to ride my bike over to the computer lab. I got to finish this project." That consistency, I guess that would be the thing that you just really learn. Like you see guys are trying to teach guys the consistency required. Young players now are too distracted by wanting to get recruited, get seen. It's like the Instagram, get views, get likes, just focus on being a good player. You want to play in college and you're a sophomore, get really good. That's the number one priority, to be good.
What is your coaching philosophy?
My why is to help players be the best they can be. That's first and foremost. And then I think there's such a powerful thing in helping people learn to be great teammates. I think they go hand in hand, and I think building championship teams is what I'm about.
Today we are joined by Eric Reveno, the Associated Head Men's Basketball Coach and General Manager at Stanford, and one of the most respected leaders in Division I basketball. Over more than the last 3 decades, Eric has built programs, mentored countless athletes, and influenced the culture of the game at every level. What makes this story compelling isn't just the wins, but the way he approaches coaching as a platform for growth, character, and education. In this episode of the Inference Show, we'll explore Eric's journey from player to coach, the philosophy that has guided him through the highs and lows of the sport, and the lessons he has learned about leadership, resilience, and creating lasting impact both on and off the court. Eric, welcome to the Inference Show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and always a privilege to talk about these topics. So thank you very much.
Eric, you've dedicated your life to basketball. What is it about basketball that inspires you?
I think, at the end of the day, for me, the fact that trying to be your best in a confined arena where there was wins and losses, improvement and struggles, the struggles lead to improvement. All those lessons and all the things that take place within a basketball court and the practice and preparation for games made me who I am as a person growing up. Unbeknownst to me, I just was like everyone else, just trying to move on to the next thing or go through life and grow up here in the Northern California. But I had these formative experiences with coaches and formative experiences with teammates through the game. And so when I was coming out of business school at Stanford Business School in 1995 and trying to figure out, what I learned in business school was how talented people are. Here in Silicon Valley, it's an impressive area and it's a very talented area. And Stanford Business School is a lot of ways the best of the best. And I like to joke that at Stanford undergrad, sometimes I didn't know the answers, but then when I went to business school, there was oftentimes I didn't even understand the question. Met my wife there, but when I was trying to figure out what really was in my DNA, it was basketball. So I went back to basketball, and like we were talking before we came back, started recording, is like a lot like the Stanford Palo Alto area has been home for me. Basketball was sort of this home base of growth and connectivity that gives me comfort and also helps make me a better person. So I keep working at it and really enjoy it.
Awesome, Eric. Obviously, you're very, very good at it. You were good at it as a player at Stanford, but, we'll trace all of that. But let's go back. Now, you grew up in Stanford, right?
Yes, I was born at Stanford, grew up in Menlo Park, which to anyone from outside the area probably feels one and the same. But for a kid around here, Menlo Park was more my neighborhood, and that's where I grew up. And Yeah, it was always I was going to Stanford soccer camp and way back when we had to walk across campus and sit in a big auditorium and watch film of you'll know film of Pele back in the mid 70s and born in 66 and around 10, 12 years old watching Pele film at Stanford campus and then going to basketball camps and yeah, so I really grew up here on campus in a lot of ways.
And how was Menlo Park
It
back
was
then?
it was great. You know, Menlo Park's a beautiful place, expensive now and expensive then perhaps. But it was a great place. You rode your bike around. Now I'm the old guys because these kids have the in Menlo Park now. These kids have these the electric ones and they're flying around. I'm like the old guy going slow down, but I'm sure people were yelling at me and my friends back then too. So I don't yell actually. I do not yell. I'm joking metaphorically. But that was me riding around my bike, going to school, and enjoying enjoying the community. And I'd ride over to Stanford campus, and there was a bowling alley in the student union, and I'd get in there, and so it was a great place to grow up. And having been 18 years away on my coaching journey, I definitely appreciate the weather even more now too.
Yeah, you've had experiences up north a little bit at Portland and then in Atlanta as well, right? We'll trace some of that again, Eric. You know, when you talked about sports, your earliest memory seems to be of soccer and watching Pele. When did you start with basketball?
That's great. That's a very good observation. Yeah, soccer camp, sort of playing it recreationally, not like kids today sometimes where it's more of an intense situation. I remember it I wasn't my first time my name was ever in the paper for this is what you remember the local country almanac or whatever the paper was called in Menlo Park here, the local thing that uh, Eric's Eric Reveno's steady goalkeeping kept the Cosmos at bay. I still remember the line I got. They just throw in people's names on these things, and then it was swimming. And then I started swimming a little bit, found some success swimming, played some water polo. My first recollection of basketball was at a free clinic at Menlo Atherton about fifth grade. So I wasn't, that's not true. Fourth or fifth grade, I started playing on different teams, but it wasn't like I was on a traveling team. It wasn't like I was doing, it was sort of, I was signed up for the sport of the period, the sport of the season. And that I remember basketball. I remember basketball on the Encinal Eagles school team in the tiny little gym and coach. And then I remember a free clinic over at MA with some NBA, it was some celebrity type of situation. And so that's a formative memory in the fact that I remember someone doing that and me remembering it and having an impact on me. It was boys and girls together. It wasn't too intense, but it made a memory on me. So when I do clinics and stuff, I remember that. And then in seventh grade, I went to St. Joseph's, and I remember a PE teacher that started because he saw my size, saw my struggles, and started to um, take me into recess and have me come by after lunch and work with me a little bit. Me and a couple other guys, we do some individual skill work, and that had a real big impact on me. And the two things that struck me were that stick in my mind were one, he really didn't know what he was doing, and two, the biggest thing he did was he cared and he poured in effort and enthusiasm and like I love for lack of a better word. He wasn't a touchy-feely guy. He was an old school PE coach, but that taking his lunchtime to help me for no reward of his own. And he taught me that like if you want to be good at this, you need to work extra. That was the lesson I learned from that. If you want to be good at this, you got to work extra. Practice alone isn't enough. And he taught me that even though we didn't the drills we were doing, I remember a couple that just sort of still don't make a lot of sense, but I chuckle.
So he demonstrated what ultimately became your first principle of selflessness, right? He took his lunch hour and gave it to you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine being a seventh, eighth grade teacher, and if I was coaching seventh graders, and teaching seventh grade PE and lunchtime came, and I wasn't assigned to duty, I'd be in the teacher's cafe, putting my feet up and relaxing. But he was out there trying to teach me some basketball. And like I say, it wasn't like particularly like Mr. Jovial fun about it, but he was trying to help, and that's what he did.
And then when it came to, when it came time for college and to choose a major, you mentioned earlier that your parents straightened you out with your grades, but you chose economics. What made you choose economics as a major?
You know what? I my high school, my rigorous high school program gave me some academic confidence, and so I uh, was not afraid of any of things coming into Stanford, and that was great. And Stanford does a nice job of gives you a lot of opportunity for 2 years. You don't have to declare a major, so you have time to move around. And uh, I thought about something like industrial engineering, that my engineering friends called imaginary engineering, the IE stuff. And then I thought about that, and I actually took Computer Science 106A, the computer science course, and loved it. I loved closest thing to an A plus I ever got probably in that class. And I was up all night programming and stuff, but I realized I couldn't, that was going to be hard with basketball. And we just had a player graduate from here who plays for the Sacramento Kings, whose major was computer science and math. So I've got very big respect for that, because some of those, it's just, you get stuck on a problem. It's all consuming in there. And I enjoyed that part of it. But I chose economics because it seemed like I was going to go into business in some capacity. I like the problem solving. I still like the strategic aspect of it, of analyzing a problem, maybe not as rigorous as some engineering, modeling or whatever you might do. But even back then, it had, and I also like the history of it. I like the history and learning about the economy, and MS one, and the money, and the Federal Reserve, and some the history of banks, and there's a lot of sort of historical economic courses that are intriguing as well, and trying to figure out whether a supply curve shifts up with this change or whether you just move along the curve. So that kind of fun stuff. So I still remember some of it many years ago. I tried to help. I got back on staff at Stanford, and the guy is like, "Oh, I'm taking econ." I said, "Oh, let me see. I can help you." And then like, I didn't remember it that well, so it wasn't happening.
But that made you very analytical, and that's something that you've used a lot, right? Looking at curves, and is the curve shifting or moving along? And do you feel that that computer science class, ultimately, what people called you later as the most advanced man in tech in college basketball, people have called you that,
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, that was because back in the day, I had my comfort with technology and like of technology, and whether it's trying to learn and keep current in AI now, or this was like in the around the 2000 I had a Palm Pilot, and I had everyone thought of their phone as the phone, whereas I was seeing what else could happen there, and I was seeing, I had a FileMaker Pro database loaded on there with all of our prospects and their academic grades. So I had the grades on there. So I'd sit in the gym, and the guy who said that quote about me was amazed, because he'd ask me a player, and I'd look up his grades on my database. And the fact that I was holding our FileMaker Pro database, which was as databases go, probably tiny, but like it's 300, 500 names and some academic and address information. It's like a tiny, but on the Palm Pilot, I'd pull out my little stylus, and I'd sit there, and I'd do that, and so as soon as when I was at Portland, and the Palm, the Apple iPhone came out, we were in the middle of camp, and I waited in line downtown, and um, bought the whole staff through our camp budget. I bought the whole staff an iPhone, and because I could get extra, and I got to the front of the line, I'm like, well, I'm gonna buy a few of these, and so and three or four of them, whatever they let me. But yeah, the computer science class is I think my good education, I don't know if I was hardwired with it, but my good education, I think, really fueled my growth mindset of being a learner, and not being afraid to, chat GPT, what's that? What can I do with this? What's the difference between that and this? And what can you do? What's the danger? What, I'm not, um, so I've always been very current, whether it's in the video editing software and things. Computer science, the problem solving of computer science and writing, the idea of clean code versus clunky code. And that, the beauty of it, like I used to write practice plans. So you think of a practice plan. First of all, I did all my practice plans. I was a head coach at Portland. I did 100 in a season, 100 practice plans. I do them in an Excel spreadsheet, which was just a way to format them, but I would do it with the times and precise times. And I would think of that practice plan. Literally, it would be like a computer program where like there's a way to get through this practice and achieve some things, and there's a clean way to do it. And like whether it's like writing an essay or something, but I thought I liked the logic based sort of like so that if you had to change something later, you can take out a piece and put something in. And so I always found that sort of that analytical, logical approach to things. And I think you're right. I think it does lend itself well to strategy and planning. Also, I think the comfort with numbers, like if you go accounting, so like our analytics in basketball is you look at a box score, and a box score is what happened in the game. Well, how you analyze a box score, like how you analyze a income statement for a company, you look at it, and depending on the business, depending on the style of play of the team, you're going to weigh different things differently. Like you're going to realize with certain business that the inventory cost of goods sold is a huge number. Whereas in certain teams, you're not going to worry about turnovers as much as you're going to worry about reboundings for their success. And so just that comfort level with numbers and ratios, because some coaches, you throw that stuff out and they think you're speaking Latin. And so it gets a little tough. So yeah, familiarity with all that stuff, I like to think is helpful.
Oh, I think it had a big impact.
Yeah.
Economics, curves, data, numbers, technology. Very few folks in basketball have stayed up all night coding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Fair point.
That is really compelling.
Especially old ones like me that had to go to the computer lab to do it. Like you couldn't do it back in your room. You had to go to the computer lab,
Yep.
and check in and be there at 3 a.m. with all these other people trying to figure stuff out.
In looking at your current title, you're the James C. Gaither Associate, head men's basketball coach, right? Which you gained in 24. I think it's really fitting for you because if you look at James Gaither, right, he started in law, did tech, was a venture capitalist and ultimately a philanthropist, right? And you seem to have those similar characteristics. I don't know if that happened by chance or somebody really thought about it, but I thought that was very interesting looking at your background and hearing about it. So I had to say that.
Oh, that's it. No, I appreciate that very much because James C. Gaither, so I knew of him. I knew about him. I had met his son. His son's about my age. So I know his son. I went to lunch with him and another friend. So I know him. I know, and I keep sort of, as I peel back the onion on getting to know him better through different things. I saw him the other night. Very nice gentleman, 80 something probably, and very sharp and very nice. And, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I was on the board of NVIDIA, 30 years or something like that, and like just stuff like that he's done. But I know he started as a lawyer. I know he's originally a lawyer, and then and the things he does now, but and just a big heart. He's got that, like you talk about the philanthropy and he's just a generous person with his energy and just how he's sort of just a good guy to be around. He's fun, and just the things he's doing, and so yeah, that's a compliment. But but I had originally when there's two people that have endowed positions. But I did request his. So it was just sort of like, well, give me that one because I knew I was familiar with it, and it sort of meant something to me. And they made me my first set of business cards and they forgot to put it on there. And, the person that handed them to me, it wasn't on there. I said, no, I said, one, it's supposed to be on there. And two, I want it on there, so it's sort of like a nice sort of standard to hold yourself to, I think it's a great example. So thank you.
Absolutely, Eric. Eric, so while you were studying economics and looking at curves, you were also doing very well in, sports, especially basketball, right? So, you were a 4-year letter winner a two-time team captain, right? So tell us more about that. How did you manage all of that? And you continued basketball, right?
Yeah, no, and the thing I'm most proud of, my first year, our team, my freshman year at Stanford, we won three Pac-10 games. And then my last year at Stanford, and we lost 15. My last year at Stanford, we won 15 Pac-10 games and we lost three. And we went to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 47 years. And the group of guys on that team were tremendous, tremendous team. So when I think of, my big formative teams learning experiences, that team taught me a lot about what an elite team looks like, and we were definitely a better. Our sum was better than our parts, and my career basketball wise, I really find it's tremendous. One of the bigger blessings about my career is that people either remember it better than it was or don't remember it at all, and which I'm fine with. I like that. So like people, oh, you were really good. Nah, it's okay. And then I was good. I mean, I mean, I didn't average 10 points a game. I averaged nine something. I was not a great shooter. I was tough. I played hard, and I played with two guys my last year that played in the NBA, and I wasn't one of them. And I played overseas afterwards and had a good career and a tremendous, I was a good college player. I was a solid college player. And so, but I'm okay when people remember me better than I was because our team was good, and that's a compliment in and of itself. So I'll take it. And then it does, yeah. So, but yeah, it was a lot of work and the discipline. It's interesting because that commitment, that standard of you have to do well in academics, and that was a guardrail that was unyielding. Like that was just sort of you do the best you can in academics. I was a 3.2 in college probably, and I wasn't killing it, but I was doing fine, and I was doing. You had to do your job in academics, and then basketball is what drove me and my passion, and so I was trying my best. But yeah, I still had to do the academics, and to be at a place at Stanford, it's fun to do your academics. So that was a good experience.
You said that that team was more than its parts. What makes a good team, Eric? And tell us more about that team.
The stuff I've written about and stuff that I've sort of formulated now. At the time, I didn't have a framework. I didn't have a understanding, and that I do now, or feel like I do now. I think back then, I think that we all, um, it meant it, winning was important to us. Being good as individuals was important to us. And we were willing to take responsibility for that. Those and we were take ownership of that, not just putting it on a leader. It's not just his fault. Or like there's with the collective personality. Our best player, I like to think of myself as a hard worker. Our best player, Todd Licht, who played in the NBA and was our star, was our hardest worker. I mean, he really set the standard. And so I consider myself a hard worker. I don't want to be outworked in any situation. I still have that sort of chip on my shoulder. And trying to be more thoughtful about how I spend my energy and everything. Try to mature in that and deeper understanding, nuanced understanding of them. But back then it was just cut and dry. It was just, you could goat me into, I was competitive as a worker. I learned I was competitive as a worker. And Todd was the hardest worker, and I wasn't going to give that up to him. And so I'd work as hard. He was going to be better, but I wasn't going to necessarily let him be a harder worker. And so there's two hard workers, and there's another, and there's a few of us like that. And then all of a sudden we're working pretty hard. Back then there was a lot of freedom away from the coaches, and we used that freedom toward those ends. And so we just became a good team. And what was interesting about it was we sort of embodied what I later heard as you go to the movies with your friends, you go to battle with your teammates. And so if you had to say harsh words, you didn't put the friendship and being liked over the objective. So if someone was doing something, you called bullshit on it and it left it. That was the norm of the team, was that there wasn't some sort of like, well, everyone needs to be included. We need to have conversation and we need to make people feel good about it. There was a toughness and an edge to it that, that wasn't the priority. That was on the list that people were respected and treated a certain way, but it wasn't. And there's a certain level of base respect, of course, that's always there. But like there wasn't something like not everyone had to feel good about it. If you had to tell, like someone's, and the thing I've learned at Stanford is people are smart, and that people, but our natural tendency as people sometimes is to try to find the easier way, And so when you were faced with a choice, you're going to take the easier solution. And sometimes you need good teammates to say, hey, man, you can do better, that believe in you.
Who was the coach at that time? These kind of things don't get, don't get created on their own. They need to be done, right? Who was the
Yeah.
coach? And
So it was Tom Davis my first 2 years, and then Mike Montgomery came in the middle, and it was a great reboot for me. So I had a lot of learning and struggle, and nothing kind of resets it in terms of getting a new fresh start with a new coach. And so I took full advantage of that. Like, had the coach stayed, would I have, things in terms of my understanding blossom? But I basically saw a lot of things, and I had better appreciation for Coach Davis after he left, for sure, and over time. But Coach Montgomery did instill a lot of that. Like he sees the world and he sees the game very clearly. The basketball, is very clear in terms of the priorities of, he doesn't overcomplicate things. So as a teacher, keeping it simple and focused on, we're going to play hard. We're going to play unselfish. And so, and he also has a little bit of a good mindset in terms of, realistic expectations of people, and putting people in the right place. A better way to say it is he's very good at putting people in the right place to be successful.
understood, Eric. Eric, one of the things that you've said that you have been a very hard worker, and then your best player back then was the hardest worker. Please help our audience understand what do you mean by that when it comes to time commitment.
So using Todd Lichty as an example, it was just um, that drive to he had that drive. I'll use him as an example. I think this applies to a lot of student athletes, that when they're focused, that they got that 18 to 24-year-old energy, and can apply, and you're not always sleeping like you should, you're not always eating like you should, but you've got an energy, your furnace is burning. Todd was someone that, his first year, he came in with high expectations and always stayed afterwards to work. So there was always had a drive so you get there at the gym and you got practice from 3:30 to 6:30, and that means you got to get there like 2:30. And when Coach Montgomery was coaching, we'd take up that whole 3 hours of practice. So, and then you'd lift weights for 45 minutes. And then you go to train table, they kept open. It wasn't much special food then. It was just, they kept it open till 8. So we get in there by 8, you eat. And then you've got a choice to make. Do you go to the library? You go home. For me, that choice was always, well, if I go home, I'll fall asleep. So I got to go to the library. And I remember being so tired, that I'd go to Green Library, and I'd take the elevator up the one flight of stairs, the one floor, because I was too tired to walk up. Then I'd get to my desk and I'd be falling asleep. And I'd be falling asleep, and so I'd put my head down on the thing and sleep for 20 minutes so I could then work and then finish out the night, go home at 11. Then you got to get to bed earlier, a little bit earlier than your teammates or than your people down the hall. And there's some discipline there. One of the most painful things my freshman year was a philosophy section. So we had to hurry off to section at 7 o'clock. And after practice and weights at 7 o'clock, sitting in a 2 hour section, listening to philosophy PhD talk about philosophy. I was sitting in the front row in a small, tiny, hot room with like 9 people, and I'm just like painfully falling asleep, having to pinch myself. It's just like, I'm just like, and I don't want to be disrespectful. It's not like you can hide. I'm falling asleep. It's the worst painful. Like, I literally couldn't stay awake. But then using Todd, the two examples I want to tell on Todd are one was like, the one stuck out. So then I was local, so my mom slid an extra bed into my room, and we slept. We made my one room little bedroom into a two bedroom and a two bed. And Todd stayed there the summer with us. And he went and worked for John Arriaga up in his ranch in Portola Valley. And he spent the summer working for him. His high powered uh, college star job was carrying manure up a hill at this ranch from like, he'd do it from like 6 a.m. till 10 or 11, work a half day. And then he'd come to the gym and shower because he was so dirty. He'd shower and then work out. And that was how he spent his summers and just get a couple of workouts in. And the other example I had was I saw him, he scored 36 points against Arizona on national TV on a Thursday night against Sean Elliott, and I said, "What are you doing?" And it's like it's probably 10 o'clock now. He goes, "I'm going to ride my bike over to the computer lab. I got to finish this project." And so I wrote, so he went, I wrote over with it because I was in the same class and I wasn't thinking about doing it, and so but so that was an example of academically how he even pulled me with him. So just a tremendous work ethic and that sort of commitment, that consistency. I guess that would be the thing that you just really learn. Like you see guys are trying to teach guys the consistency required.
Eric, you finished in 89 and off you were to Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, and that again, I've talked about great team building experiences, seeing different teams and some of the things that come from teams. I was gonna go to Europe. I had taken Italian one quarter. I thought, okay, I'll go take some Italian. I wasn't very good at it. Everyone said it was the easy A. I take Italian one first quarter, easy A, and I got a B plus, I think. So I'm not a natural language guy. But I went to Japan because they recruited me, and I went there, and I wanted to go into business. And in 1989, Japanese business was booming, and so I went there and played 4 years there. It was wonderful. I learned the language. It was a semi-pro situation. They were paying me to play basketball, but they wanted me to go to the office, like some of the Japanese players had to do. And so I went to the office. I said, if you're going to make me go to the office, give me something to do. Again, it's that idea that I'm going to be like, so the first year there, I kind of just used the time to call home and study Japanese. Uh, some of your people might not remember that phone bills used to actually be something you had to think about back in, and so, I wasn't FaceTiming anybody. I wasn't, getting the free Wi-Fi anywhere. I was using the phone in an office. I lived in a dormitory my first year with 60 other Japanese single guys. And so it was a great experience for me culturally, for as someone who grew up right around here and having that experience. I lived there. Then as work progressed in the office, I started doing more. And again, using that econ I was doing, we played for Japan Energy, which is a large crude oil importer, refiner, gas stations, and so I was in the crude oil importing department doing analysis during the first Gulf War, trying to figure out. And I remember the Japanese guy. So is President Bush really going to do something? I was supposed to be the expert. The American knows. Let's ask him. But what I would do is I'd go in the morning and do a Reuters overview, and then I would write sort of a list of things that happened. Of course, all the Japanese executives spoke English and read English, but just the ability to go through a volume of information quicker and find the right thing. So I did that, and it was a great experience. Got into Stanford Business School from that. I learned the language too. I was conversational, and that was my team paid for my language school. My 4 years, I stuck with it, and so it was a great experience. I went back to business school.
I remember trying to learn Japanese. Eric, I happened to live in Korea for 6 years,
Oh,
and I became good in Korean. I speak 5 languages, but Japanese was so hard because you have
really? Wow.
hiragana, you have katakana, and once you figure those two out, there comes kanji.
Yeah, so katakana and hiragana, and so I learned those two, and I'm like, okay, and then it's like, and that which is helpful because you can read some signs, you can say some words, and I said, okay, well, in order to speak a language, I got to be able to like read a morning paper. Well, the Chinese characters are the kanji,
Yep.
and it's like in order to read a paper, someone once told me how in order to read a newspaper, you probably have to read about 1,500 of those. And I really feel like at around 200, my brain ran out of RAM. I was just sort of out of capacity to, I could get the easy ones, and then some of it's fascinating. Like it's a square for an exit. I don't know, like, but like a square is like and it's pronounced coochie for mouth, Gucci for exit. But you're like, okay, it's an opening, so you get that. But there's some that are easy, and you feel like, but there's so few and far between the ones that make sense. You start getting the ones that have like 12 strokes, 15 strokes. That was not, but I tried. I tried for a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe when I'm old and retired, I want to keep my brain going. That's sort of my Sudoku of whatever. Just sort of try to learn again.
Boy, Eric, you've learned kanji, Sudoku, you can do with your feet.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
very certain
Exactly,
of that.
exactly.
Eric, so you had this awesome experience. You were working and playing basketball, and you learned a lot, completely new experience living there. Living abroad out of your comfort zone teaches one a lot. um,
Yeah,
Completely. And then you came back and you went back to grad school pursuing your MBA.
yeah. No, and that was not as thought out and and where I wish I had had more direction going in where I wanted to get out of it, but I was just so I was my coming in my last year, I was ready to go home. It was been 4 years away. I thought, college, 4 years pro, and now looking back, gosh, I should have maybe gone and tried to play in Europe somewhere, get a different experience. At that age, I should have, but I was kind of ready to come home and see friends and be around, be back in the States, and so I'm excited about that. And so I do that. It was a great experience and a great educational experience, personal experience. Met my wife in business school. The connections I made, the friends I made. But it basically comes down to how do you execute something, and and that's what I think I can apply to coaching. But so when I did coming out of business school, put some hard thoughts to it, I realized that I'm with the best of the best, like I alluded to earlier, but yet this is not what I want to be doing. This is not, I don't want to be a brand manager for Procter and Gamble, or I don't want to be, I'm not even, a consultant or something. I want to be more in the line of fire on some things, and I want to be, and so yeah, so but it wasn't until the end of that. But yeah, business school was fantastic.
And then in 97 was when you started your coaching journey, right? You became a assistant coach for the Cardinals. And that continued till 2006. In 2005, you became associate coach. How were those 10 years or so?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was the golden era of Stanford basketball, and so for me to have the good fortune to have my former head coach, who I played for, still be the head coach. I mean, he had lasted all that time and he had done well. He'd been offered the Virginia job and stayed. So I mentioned this just to pay gratitude to the serendipity of my good fortune to get that opportunity to come back to Stanford, and so because I talk to young people all the time trying to get into coaching, I was very lucky that my former coach was still at my alma mater. And so I got back in and I was here, and we had the golden era of Stanford basketball. We were ranked number one. This picture here that you can't see is us winning our first Pac-12 championship in Maples when I was there. There's a Final Four ticket. I'm getting good at pointing. That's the first time I've done this. Final Four ticket right there in Boston. We played in the Final Four in '98. This T-shirt down here is 1999, 2000, and 2001. We won the 3 years in a row the Pac-10 championship. So it was the best. And so everyone then, it was the beauty of that was I was still young. I tell people I played for Stanford. They were like, oh, Stanford, they're really good. And they thought my career was better than it was. But that was all those guys. I happened to be coaching. And that's Mark Marquis, the baseball coach bobblehead. You always got to have a bobblehead there. So, but yeah, so it was great experience, and to be in again a learning environment where you're trying to get better and you're around some of the best and brightest, and the students that go on to do things, and whether it's our student workers or players, we have alumni nights and stuff. So that 10 years there, and it got me the opportunity to then become a head coach at Portland, and sort of raise the level of my pedigree as a coach that has set me up till now.
Eric, what made that team great and what made it remarkable? Was it recruitment? Was it the coaching? Was it a combination of many things, or was it serendipity?
Yeah, there was the great question and one I reflect on. There was a player that came before me, Brevin Knight, who was a smaller African American, tough-nosed point guard that came in here. And when he came, Stanford was had won 7 games, and when he left, Stanford had played in the Sweet 16. And so I came the following year, and he changed the culture of the Stanford basketball. And with, like you said, Coach Montgomery being the right guy for when my group was here, but Coach Montgomery then adapting to a different personality, a different. So I give, obviously the fact that there was continuity of the coach and then, but Brevin Knight, who was at Seton Hall Prep in Orange, New Jersey, and wasn't offered a scholarship by Seton Hall, comes all the way across the country to Seton, to Stanford, and becomes a Hall of Fame player for us, an NBA player. And he changed the culture. And then all of a sudden, Jason and Jaron Collins, who were two NBA players that came, and then Josh Childress, and then, but it was also the guys that were traditionally your more Stanford-like players. And by that, I mean guys like me that weren't necessarily NBA players, but overachievers and guys that work. So there was still always in the DNA of a Stanford team, the idea of being better than your parts. And that's the way Coach Montgomery coached. You talked about giving credit to Coach Montgomery and the leader, and that was a great point of my team. But like these teams, yeah. So now all of a sudden the talent got better, but he was still staying. He wasn't just relying on the talent. He was still staying with his very disciplined in how he approached things, very disciplined in staying on the fundamentals, going through his checklist of how you win basketball games. Just because even for game, we were we were we were elite at beating the teams we're supposed to beat, because we prepared the same way all the time. We didn't lose sight of, we didn't rely on just being better. We worked hard so that DNA didn't change. And then we had more talent than say my teams. And so it was a lot of fun to be coaching that and learning from that.
Awesome, Eric. Eric, let's switch gears a little bit. Um, uh, 2006 or so, you moved to Portland, and then you stayed there till 2016. What made you move? Was it the head coach job, or
Yes. So just the
tell us
opportunity to
more?
become a head coach. I tried to be a head coach. I wanted to, I've run my own program, and I was fortunate enough to the WCC, in which University of Portland plays, has Gonzaga, St. Mary's, had 8 schools at a time. It's just very good schools, very good opportunity. My wife had sort of resigned ourselves that we weren't going to be able to move to someplace like Portland. We get stuck in someplace like Pocatello, Idaho. She's from New York and went to Virginia, and she was just sort of say, okay, as a coach's wife, we could end up in a lot of places. And I wouldn't argue with her because I wasn't sure, but I'd say at least there's colleges there. Like we spent the last couple of years in Corvallis, actually, and that was proved to be true. Corvallis is not a booming metropolis, but it is a college town with interesting things going on. But anyway, so go to Portland. It was great. The team was great. The commitment to winning was great. It's a tough job, and we were able to be successful. Got ranked in the top 25. And it was great being a coach and a head coach there. And my family lived there for 10 years. Good situation for them. My kids now at this point were growing up. They were 1 and 3, 1 and 4 when we moved there. It was great. So I really enjoyed that. And then, but 10 years, we had some success. I was coach of the year 1 year. And then after 10 years, get let go because you never made the NCAA tournament, and they've yet to do as well since I left in 2006. And I just say that just to say that, I have no hard feelings or anything. It's just sort of, it was a hard job. And I feel like I have a peace of mind that did a pretty good job. And I do have some things I learned from it in terms of what I could have done better and where I might have, once we had gotten to the point where we were top, for me, that league was so tough. We had stayed up there. Like we should have stayed 3 or 4 right in that out of 8. We should never have dipped back down to 7 and 6 where we did the last couple of years. And then, so I could learn from that and see the things that I did. And the funny thing is, you mentioned some of the stuff I learned from now is that, we were getting better talent the last couple years, but we had lost some of the drive that you need to be good. And those guys weren't as good of workers. They weren't as good. They're good kids because I mean, if you're to University of Portland, nice little Catholic school, and good people, good coaches. They're not bad kids choosing the school. It's just like you're saying, like a lot of adults don't have some of these things. All of a sudden, we had more talented people that weren't choosing, that didn't have that. Whereas, I have one player that I think still playing professional, and he wasn't as talented as some of the guys, but he was just obsessed about being a great basketball player, and so it's just, but he was in the early part, whereas he wasn't, whereas the ones that really had to work at and recruit and really sort of, that thought they were better and were looking for an easier way, those were the ones that you ended up losing a little bit more with.
Yeah, I mean, to pull off these kind of things, Eric, I believe that you really do need to get like 20 things right, right?
Yeah.
Almost all of those 20 things right. And 19 and 18 sometimes is not enough. Is that
Right.
true?
Yeah, no, and that's a good way to look at it. And then also, I think the idea that we have more control over some of those things than we know, whether however you assign it or whatever, you just got to focus on the process. No, I would definitely say that because I've learned that over the, looking, because you go through you go through waves of learning. One year out from getting fired, your learnings are different than 5 years out, and whether that's because of your headspace or because of the experiences in between, and probably a little bit of both, you look back or something hits you and goes, aha, that was, if we had just, sort of, that was and then you could start, what happens is you're probably still, that list of 18 to 20 things is probably, things are shifting up and down as you get a better understanding. So yeah, that's a good point.
And then you spent 5 years at tech. How was that?
It was great. It was working for Josh Pastor, who thought about things differently than I did, who had had some success. I loved the school. Every degree is a Bachelor of Science. They turn out the largest amount of African American engineers a year. It's very truly diverse. Atlanta's a really interesting city. To move that, it was a great reboot for me, and to not and just and to be an assistant coach after being a head coach. So the biggest thing is with that is you understand the struggles of being a head coach. You understand that sometimes as a head coach, you make a decision, and you're like 55% sure it's the right choice, but it's a yes no answer question, and so you've got to either choose. So you say yes, we're going to do it, and everyone goes, okay, we'll do it, and then it goes wrong, and you're like, well, I knew there was a 45% chance it wasn't going to work. I was basic, but you had to make one of them. And so, like, as an assistant coach, knowing that and having appreciation for the struggles, I tried to be a better assistant coach. And I learned as a coach, like, there was times when I'm sitting there going, okay, I would not do this way, and then we did it the way I wouldn't have done it, and I would say it. And Coach Passner was great about hearing me out, and he goes, "Yeah, we're going to go with this way." And I was great about, okay, we're going with A. I would recommend B, and he decides to go with A, and then lo and behold, A was a better way. So there was a new answer because of seeing him do A. I then saw that C was the better answer. That we combine those in a certain way. That'd be pretty cool. And so like you just keep learning and figuring it out. And then there's no two teams are the same, so it's not like but certain drills and certain ways to practice and yeah, so I appreciated the ways he was different. It was great that it wasn't someone just directly the way I coached. I thought it was better that it was just kind of completely different. It was more fun.
And it gave you a chance to again observe, being a head coach while not being one, although
Right.
you've been one for all these years, right?
Yeah, no, and so there was at the end of the game, a couple things happened toward the end of a close game. Is one, everyone on the bench just sort of their perspective gets narrowed and they focus on the same thing a little bit versus having the discipline, like sitting there and everyone's watching the current play. This is going, I was able to sit there and say, okay, I don't need to be yelling it. I don't need to be coaching this play. I need to be, what's going to happen next? We've decided to play a guy with 4 fouls. If he gets one more, he's going to foul out. So let's just assume that happens. Let's talk about it over here and figure out what we recommend, amongst ourselves. So when we go to the coach, we're not all coming at him with different answers. And so some real time things like that. One time I even said, like, because I knew it happened to me sometimes, because coaches, like with this is like with 30 seconds left and two, three people were talking to the head coach. I said, he's not listening right now. I can tell he's not listening. He's coaching the game. He's locked in. Just wait a second. Just give him some space to think, for God's sake. It's like, and so like just sort of instead of turning up the heat on because you get excited and got an idea. So yeah, no, it was great being assistant coach, and Coach Pastner and the staffs were great. So I've been very fortunate to work with great people and great student athletes. So that continued. Just very fortunate.
And then your 2 years at Oregon, 23 onwards, right? Tell us a little
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, so it was an opportunity to come back. So it was actually Oregon State and with Wayne Tinkle, and to play to do that. Wayne Tinkle I'd known since high school, the head coach, and he had an opportunity, and it was really just an opportunity to get back to the West Coast because we had enjoyed Atlanta, we had thought it was great, but it was kind of like, okay, home is home. My wife's parents, who were from the East Coast, who had been in Florida, there had been some things that had made that being on that time zone really advantageous, but they had since passed, and so that pool was no longer there. My parents were still going strong back here at the time, so all of a sudden it's like, okay, so we just moved back to the same time zone. At least it wasn't back here ultimately where I wanted to be at Stanford, but it was in the same, and it was working with good people again, and so we made that move.
And then 2 years later, you came back to Stanford.
Coach Smith, the head coach, I had gotten to know while he was at St. Mary's in the same conference as Portland, and then he had gone to from there to Columbia, kept in touch, and then when he moved back to San Francisco, I almost started to work with him there. I had just been let go at Portland, and we talked, and that was close. And then when he went to Washington State. While I was at Georgia Tech, I just moved to Georgia Tech. He actually offered me a position, and I was like, nah, I just moved my family to Georgia Tech and Portland, Washington, Atlanta, Georgia, and then moved back to Pullman, Washington was a big jump. And basketball wise, I liked the concept, but I was enjoying things, so I stayed put. And then when he got the job at Stanford, my alma mater, and I know I could help, and especially now during this changing times in college athletics with all the craziness going on, and I like being back at Stanford. We're trying to my alma mater, like we said, where I grew up in that full circle moment. It fits basketball wise, but also fits for me personally, and to be able to try to figure out how Stanford can remain relevant in this changing, or frankly, professionalization of college athletics, yet stay true to our ideals. Let's stay true to uh, providing elite athletic development and elite education for these student athletes. So, like the stories of Todd Lichty riding his bike cross campus, that's not a different world. That's just how that's what you do. And so trying to maximize that and be successful here has been great, has been tremendous.
Eric, how's the 2025 has been a year where there have been so many events, right? You've called it the professionalization of college sports, right? What kind of impact is the NCAA settlement going to have?
Stanford is behind in terms of sharing revenue with our players, in terms of not in terms of what the players are actually getting yet, but just in terms of embracing it, preparing for it. And so it's been a year of catching up a little bit, being on the sideline, maybe waiting for the dust to settle to see which direction we're going. But we're very excited. We have a new athletic director, John Donahoe, previously at eBay and Nike, and CEO with some longtime Bain consultant. Actually did a consulting project in his early days with '90s on Stanford athletics, a 5-year strategic plan, ironically. And is a Stanford GSB graduate, so he's well suited for the task. But I think now we're as it's become repeated a little bit lately around here, as we move from being in a stance where we're on our back foot to, stepping forward and getting on that front foot a little bit and being proactive and taking advantage of what makes Stanford special and leaning into what makes Stanford special to compete. This 2025 is hopefully, and will continue to, is be the year that flips from back foot to front foot, and because you can't wait for perfect clarity on where this is going, like a lot of things these days. It's just like the uncertainty on certain things, it can be paralyzing. And so if we wait too much and just freeze up on that, it's not gonna, we have to battle. Maybe we're battling just to keep up, and not get ahead, but we better battle or else you're gonna fall behind.
Coach, let's switch gears a little bit again. What is your coaching philosophy?
So, I feel like my why is to help players be the best they can be. So that's first and foremost. And then I think there's such a powerful thing in helping people learn to be great teammates. I think they go hand in hand, and I think building championship teams is what I'm about. So that really is the mission, to develop skills, help players be the best they can be, and build championship teams. So uh, I'm always trying to be a great teammate, to embody that. To And with that, I've learned, one of the things I learned in Japan. I've got my one of my five pillars of being a great teammate is maintain mission focus. I think sometimes that some people will lose track of what the objective is, versus, like I was saying, just getting along. Like, we got to get along. That makes us a team. No, winning games, getting the product out, you know, you know, um, what was it? Like shipping the product or meeting the deadline, doing what you got to do, and doing that. And then also, I think, showing up, and, for yourself, and being the best you can be, constantly trying to be the best you can be, is part of it as well.
Thank you, Coach, for sharing that. Coach, let's get your perspective on technology. Are you using AI right now?
Yes. So I think, yeah, no, I'm using it. I use it. I'll try different things in terms of researching and putting together, like, you might use an assistant to do some research on something you don't have time to take a deep dive on, knowing that there might be some issues with it, but just taking a good look and then asking questions. I've looked at it. I put an MRI report, not the actual imaging of my back, into it, and had it explained to me. Had it explain to me what does all this mean? Is this symptom? Then later ask you about this symptom or that symptom. I'll do things like that. I'm curious about how to help it make me manage my email, without giving up my whole, just teach it to do that. So I've got these binders over here. Where's there? There, over there. Those binders. I'm getting good at pointing. Those binders. There's a practice plan for every practice in a year on some of those, and so I can look back, and basically that's the Excel spreadsheet. It's all in one Excel workbook with 100 different pages. I fed that in there and tried to see if it could learn how to write a practice plan, but then I had to teach it how to teach it what each drill is for. It could, some by the names it could infer, but others it didn't know. And so I looked at that, and I was just curious. So I like doing that to learn, because I think that's where some of that's going. Like, writing an email for you. Why couldn't it write a rough practice plan? You say, hey, today I want to spend this amount of time working on this, working on that. And then it writes out a sample practice plan. You go back and edit it, and then it helps you remind yourself of a drill. So I think about that. The big thing I think that I'm most curious about with AI is where it's going with video analysis for us for basketball. So the ability to say, this is, and they do it in the NBA now, I think. I'm pretty sure they do it in the NBA, where there's a lot more advanced, but like for us, but the NBA took a big leap in this, because they had cameras from Sports Vision that would basically they outfitted the arena with $100,000 worth of special cameras that could identify at all times where the 10 players, the referees, and the ball were. And now AI can just do it with a simple one video thing. But they have all those years of data. And so they can read, so they know what to feed the AI. So I think about it more than I do it, but I'm curious here at Stanford if we can find a way to because I think that's a competitive advantage. I think it's where the things are going. And like you say, like you've noticed, I'm curious that way.
I think there's a lot of potential in analytics and so forth. And Eric, you've been an early user of video analysis. What's the current state of the art in college basketball of video analysis? How do you use it? What all things do you track with it? How often do you do it? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, I used to, I was back when it was big news when you started capturing a one game, capturing a game and making it digital, and you had these brick, 1 gig hard drives for, that were expensive and whatnot. Now, with the ability to transfer files, it's changed the game, just the video now, like the ability to let me summarize it. So the big thing is the availability and timeliness of video has definitely changed the game. So you play on Thursday night and your opponent plays on Thursday night and you play them Saturday. It used to be you had to wait for the FedEx of the video. And and then that you might not get that. So you make scouting adjustments, see the most recent game. You can see it that night. You can break it down and teach. So there's a higher premium on creating edits of teaching. You can circle things. You can shade things. You can slow motion things very simply. So just simple, basic video editing. You can make there's a movie organizer where you have 10 rows and there's each showing something. You can move them around. You can shorten clips, lengthen clips. We used to have, when I first got in this office in 1998, we had deck to deck, and there was a computer system of some kind that you had 2 decks that could record onto a third VHS, and so just the leaps and bounds in that. And so that's standard now, that people are good at that, and then putting in a slide and making presentations for teaching the game and analyzing the game. Then there is the analytics piece of that, where a company like Synergy logs every game, and whether they're using AI to log games or how much they are, we don't know, but we pay for them because it'll say, if I want to find every time this player turned the ball over, I can click on it and watch those. Or if I want to say there's certain buckets of situations, like anytime he's involved in a screen where he fouls, you could find those. So you have these categories, just like, again, like that balance sheet you're looking at, but you have a stat sheet that has all these things. Every time he gets an offensive rebound, I can look at it. Anytime, what's his points per possession he scores, I can click on it and look at it. So the linking of the stats and the video is much more readily available, and so that's really commonplace. That's sort of the cost of doing business. Now, I think, when you start linking your own individual practice stats and things that you're looking for, so that might be something like how many times the ball changes sides of the floor. Simple theory being, in a 30-second shot clock, if you change the ball offensively 2, 3 times, that's going to weaken the defensive principles. Whereas if you kind of just come down and there's not much movement, a good defensive team is more set. You move it a few times, it's been shown that, like, your points per possession is going to go up. So how much are you breaking that down? You have a video imaging where you can click on and tag the video, which is what we've done for the last 20 years, tagging video. And the user interface with that's become really good. It's not hard. You watch the video, you're tagging, you're moving, you can label things. But now, again, the AI and starting to do these things that you could teach it how to do. I wish we had cleaner data sets to teach how to do the certain things that we do. Like, so I think teams that have teams that have that larger data set that they can teach things and have, some continuity. But now thinking in terms of how we are storing information, how we're logging, so we get at the end of this season, we might have more clearly what we want because we stat like 50 different things during practice, missed block offs, 50-50 balls. So if you and I are the loose ball's right there on the floor and you dive for it and I think about it, you're going to get a point where I'll get a negative for not being reactive, teaching the AI to do that. So, but most people aren't doing that. I don't know of anyone. I get a little nervous that maybe the competition's getting ahead of us there, getting some things, because then you could start feeding in. The power there would be you start feeding in your recruit videos, and you could analyze the recruiting videos. You could say, hey, watch this player here and tell us how he looks on these metrics that we like.
Eric, we have talked about a lot of different things. It's been a fascinating conversation, getting to know you as a person, your origin story, and talking about a lot of different things. We're at the last part of our interview now. Let's talk a little bit about on what advice you would give to, a young athlete who's looking to play college sports and then be successful in basketball. What would be your advice to them?
I guess it's the other side of the coin of my why. So you take my why coin, you flip that over, and for an athlete, I'd say try to be the best player you can be. So whether it's and if that's important to you, being a good player is important to you, and you want to be good. What inputs are going into that, and like the coaching, my work, the practice, the nutrition, the sleep, the taking care of my academics. But okay, let's try to clean that up and take care of that. And then being a good teammate. I think the idea that the more we can all learn that we go farther with each other, and both little and small ways that the more we're connected and supporting each other, will go farther and be more successful. I think learning that as being a good teammate will help you achieve your goals more. What I think happens is young players now are too distracted by wanting to get recruited, get seen. It's like the Instagram, get views, get likes, just focus on being a good player. You want to play in college and you're a sophomore, get really good. That's the number one priority, to be good. To try to trick your way in, network your way in, it falls short. Now, if it's spring of your senior year and no one, then there's there's a timing element to that, but that timing element of the exposure and the importance of that happens much later. And then the other thing I'd say to that, to add to that, would be, allow yourself to weigh in, and parents allow them to weigh in how much they enjoy it. So the example there would be team A may be for some reason a better improvement situation, but team B isn't quite there, but you're really going to enjoy it a lot more. The love of the game will get increased. So like it's choosing that job because you're gonna work harder. It's choosing, like, and it's just, and that though you'll be successful. Then too often, especially younger kids, where they're just still, then that flame can be put out, that excitement can be put out in a wrong choice like that.
Eric, we've talked about a lot of different things. I've enjoyed really, hearing you and, your background, your life's journey. It's been really powerful. Is there anything else you would like to say to our audience?
Just the idea that, like, what I keep learning, it keeps coming back to me, is trying to be a good teammate. So, just trying to, and that means different things, but mainly it's about showing up, trying to be positive, taking responsibility for outcomes. Yeah, you could still be about winning and losing, but being a good teammate. I think sometimes we forget that we put too much pressure on the leaders and leadership, but just trying to be a good teammate. And so, just to be able to talk about it and think about it, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Eric, thank you so much for being on the Inference Show. Today we were joined by Eric Reveno, the Associated Head Men's Basketball Coach and General Manager of the Stanford Cardinals basketball. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.